When it comes to security, I've heard engineers talk about how difficult it is to go back and fix something that is being like caught in a scanner, right? So something is saying, "Hey, you're using a version that is a medium level vulnerability. It's not at the critical level, it's not at the high level." And I have to go back and fix that because it's important. And I think some of our engineers have looked at that and said, it's important, but how important is it? Is it more important than me getting this done on time and delivered on time so we can meet our deadlines? It's at a medium level. I think the way we've categorized vulnerabilities, where we say this is critical, this is medium, this is high, this is low, it causes frustration down the line because it gives you a misconception of how important it is to go and handle that problem.
Welcome to the season 3 of The Elephant in
The
AppSec.
podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host and AppSec enthusiast and growth manager at Escape. Today's episode is a special one. I'm joined by Desmond Lamptey, a software engineering manager at a large financial org. I first came across Des during his talk on API security at APIDays in Paris, and honestly it was one of the best talks I've seen. Not only because of the insights, but also the dad jokes. This talk made me curious. What drives a seasoned engineer like Desmond to speak about security with such passion? And more importantly, what does he think security teams get wrong when it comes to their collaborations with teams like his? With over a decade of technical experience and a certified hacker certification under his belt, Desmond regularly shares his knowledge for public speaking and brings a unique developer's perspective to security. In this episode, we dive into his path to becoming a security champion, the challenges of engaging developers in security conversations, and why he would change the way security teams label vulnerabilities for developers. We'll also discuss how gamifying security education can help close the gap between devs and security teams. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes. And with that, get ready to hear Des' opinions. Dive right in.
Hi Des, I'm very excited to have you on the Elephant in AppSec podcast. Yeah, we met last year at the API Days. And if you remember, you gave that incredible talk filled with dad jokes. Also, yeah, giving an example of your daughter, and it was very nice and it was very memorable for me. And I think also what stick out the most, that you shared actual security tips from a developer experience. And I thought it could be great to have someone not specifically dedicated to the security on the podcast, that finally have a security champion, on board. So all the security engineers who are listening can also understand maybe sometimes better your perspective and what's important for you, and maybe some developers who are watching it, or they can share, it with their developers to maybe motivate them to become as passionate, as you are. How actually, you got to the point that you were just not, just interested in security, but actually decided, to speak about it on the conference and share with
Yeah.
others.
Thanks for having me, Alex. So yeah, I remember that talk as one of the moments where I felt like I had finally jumped into the other side of yeah, in a way where like I don't see myself as just an engineer. I see myself as many things, and one of those things is a security champion. And I think to be a security champion, you have to also kind of like be how do I put it? An enthusiast, right? An ambassador
Yeah.
for it, right? And I felt like doing that talk in Paris at API Days was really one of those steps towards becoming that, right? So I appreciate that, you were able to see that and enjoy it. And I'll be doing more of that, right? I've been doing that for some time now, and I plan to do more of it. So you asked about how I got to also get engaged with and learn the security side of engineering, right? And I think this goes back to maybe I want to say 2018 when I started a role.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I started a role as I wouldn't call myself a cyber engineer at that time, but I was in a learning role where my job as an engineer was to help other people learn cyber. It was very straightforward. So, I was faced with the task of how do we make people excited about cybersecurity? How do we make engineers excited about cybersecurity? Which is almost like it's almost like
Is there a magic recipe?
like, how do you do that, right? How do you make someone who is busy with other things, has to focus on developing and bringing out new features? How do you make them excited about security? It's a really difficult bridge to build. And I felt like through this role, I had started to build that bridge. And even though the bridge wasn't perfect, I was able to help other people get across the bridge as well. And I'll talk about what went into that at a high level, but I'll also talk about what came out of that afterwards. So one of the things that went into that is incentivizing engineers to learn security, not just by reading about it, but by actually doing it, right? By taking part in it. So we had several courses and development programs, several like certification programs and badges and points and all types of energetic, lively things that engineers are very competitive by nature. A lot of them are. And by nature, we use their nature to get them excited about security through this program, which has points and badges and all types of rewards. They started to get engaged with it. One of the platforms we used was Secure Code Warrior, which I think is a great platform. But we didn't just take Secure Code Warrior and hand it to developers and say, hey, here you go. Good luck. We turned it into a program. We wrapped it into other things, a security champion program. And as engineers engage with it, they realize, oh, okay, this is actually fun, right? This can be something that I enjoy doing. And we actually got them to be part of the program to teach other engineers how to code securely. So it became something where we're not just the ones being ambassadors, but now we're also recruiting other people to be ambassadors so that they can show their peers that, hey, this stuff can actually be enjoyable if we do it the right way.
What was the moment that when you felt the most proud of what you've achieved?
The moment when I felt the most proud, I would say when we looked at the data, right? And we looked at the outcome of what we had done over the years. This might have been maybe 2021 and 2020 timeframe. 2 or 3 years had passed. See, this is a thing that doesn't take a couple months. Several years pass, and we look back at the data, and the data was matching what we were feeling, the energy and the vibe we were getting from the organization. The data was matching. And what I mean by that is we could see that in the numbers, the number of people that had learned, the scores that they were getting from the platform was increasing. The number of people who were making different types of mistakes, right? So one of the things I want to step back and say is that, like, we don't do this to get rid of all vulnerabilities. It's not
It's
possible.
impossible. It's just
It's not possible, right? We also don't expect to see vulnerabilities go down immediately, right? We expect to see different types of vulnerabilities. We expect to see different types of mistakes, and we expect to see an increased awareness of those mistakes. And that's what we were seeing. We were seeing an increased awareness, which is what we were chasing after the whole time, is awareness, right? So with that finding of like, hey, now people are more aware and we can feel the energy of like people actually enjoy this stuff, they're having fun, and the data's matching that. That's when I finally felt like, okay, we've gotten somewhere. The tough thing is maintaining that and keeping that energy like consistent. It's really hard to do, because obviously this something else is going to catch their attention, something else is going to take their time, and they're going to move on to something different that's more in their mind at that time important.
And how do you measure the awareness?
How do we measure awareness? So there are a couple things that we look at. We try to find whether there are more reported bugs in our bug program. So this program is where engineers can actually come in and say, hey, I found something and I found something in someone else's application and I want to make sure we're aware of it so we can get it fixed. So we're keeping track of like, are we seeing an increase there? The other piece of it is, and this one is slightly different. We have a program where we have engineers be part of finding, or not finding, but reviewing code that's been submitted and that is going to production. So essentially, it's a program where you as an engineer, you've been trusted with the role of reviewing code before it goes to production. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a side thing that you do. Yeah,
QA.
and you might do it maybe like 10 minutes, 20 minutes a week. You might look at one deployment and you'll just check to see, is this actual finding a false positive or an actual problem that's happening? Is this something that could really be a hindrance or a vulnerability in production? We started to see an increase in partnership and involvement in that program as well. So people who not just want to be aware, but also want to be on the side of reacting, the proactive side, right? Those two things are key indicators that we're starting to get some traction where the interest is turning into action.
Yeah, maybe they also, as you mentioned, yeah, the engineers are competitive. So for them, it was also kind of internal competition, how much I can review and find their
Yeah. So
between each other.
Yep. Everything becomes a competition. They start to say, oh, how many can I find? And it helps to keep the energy up, right? It keeps you feeling like you're contributing to something that's bigger than yourself.
Quite often, engineers are often also opinionated. I don't know, I mean, if that's your case. That's the case on your team, but did you have moments where someone had their maybe negative opinion about security or things put in place?
Absolutely. Even myself included. I've had negative opinions about our programs, and I won't call them negative, I'll call them constructive opinions.
Okay, that's very correct way
Yeah.
of framing that.
Yeah, we've had, and this is how you know you have a program that's working, because you have people that care enough to say, hey, we need to change this, or we need to revise this, or this isn't working properly. And people will say, engineers are very opinionated, as you said. And people that I've heard give some of the best criticism have been specifically around, are we doing enough just by saying, hey, come over here, let me show you what cross-site scripting looks like in code? Is that enough? So if I take you and I say, hey, let me spend 2, 3 hours with you, and I'm going to help you see what SQL injection is, you're going to see what cross-site scripting is, you're going to be able to do some of it yourself, and then you're going to take an exam on it. And if you pass this exam, you're certified as an engineer, a secure engineer here, you're certified. Is that enough? And the truth is, it's not, right? It's not, because there has to be something ongoing that will keep you, keep your tools sharp.
Yeah, keep you
Yeah.
always engaged actually and remembered. It's like with the language, if you don't practice, you forget.
Yeah. So I remember a particular engineer who was really involved in our program asked us whether we had looked into some type of continuing education credits for what we were doing. And we hadn't started looking at that or thinking about it. And that goes a lot towards the thought of, are we spending too much time, too much of our engineers' time? They are asked to do their day job, right? Their job is to make the customers happy, make the company more profitable, deliver features. And here we are saying, hey, spend some time on security as well. And I think my criticism at the time was that I didn't want to spend too much of our engineers' time. So I didn't want us to look into that just yet. But I think that was the wrong approach at that time. And the reason why I say that's the wrong approach is because if done correctly, security should be part of that time, right? It should be
Yeah.
woven into the feature creation and the serving our customers. Doing security the right way is a form of serving our customers the right way. And I had to, as an engineer, revise how I think of it, because I always kind of think of it as an afterthought, right? Even as a person who is beginning to be so connected to security as part of my role, I still saw it as an afterthought. And I think a lot of engineers also feel the same, because there's so many other things that are more important. Eventually, where we got to with that is we said, okay, we're going to find a way to build in a continuing education program that woven into the program that allows you to continue to build on what you've learned initially, so that it becomes something that's part of your role.
Is it something that you evaluate when you hire someone on your team, for example, or if you participate in the interviews right now, let's say, do you actually ask someone security question, if you hire an engineer?
Not to my knowledge, I don't think.
Huh?
I don't tend to do recruiting, but To my knowledge, it's not something that I've seen us do, and I think we should do it, right? It should
I
be
mean,
something.
because it's easier to find someone who's already like at least has some knowledge about it than teach them, from the start. Yeah, if they are not at all interested in that, it can be a very hard battle in the long run sometimes. Yeah. Do you think also? I think I remember you've said to me that developers are often shunned upon or talked down by security in general. But do you think sometimes it's also because security engineers get a bit too technical or use jargon or words that you don't find the connections like vulnerability names? I don't think. If you don't have some knowledge, you will not know vulnerability names. Like, do you think sometimes it is also kind of the problem?
Yeah. There are so many pieces to this problem. We talked about there. This is a multitude of problems that have built on top of itself. We talked about how security is an afterthought. We talked about training. We talked about incentivizing engineers. But I think one of the pieces is that there's a misconception about how security is supposed to be done and what's involved in it. So a lot of folks will have this idea that certain tools or certain platforms or frameworks are supposed to handle everything for them. A lot of engineers will have this thought that things are supposed to be done for them. And you asked about how sometimes it can feel like it's too complex, right? Maybe security engineers have this like high standing, hey, you're supposed to be doing this, you're supposed to be doing that. Why aren't you thinking about this, thinking about that? And it becomes overwhelming to the point where the complexity makes me tune out, right? It's like, all right, I can't handle this and handle all the things you're talking about. There was a time, I'll tell you a story. There's a time where I'm a people watcher, right? I really enjoy
Okay.
people. Yeah. So I remember being at lunch and overhearing a conversation. I believe this must have been a group of engineers because of the things they were talking about. But I remember they got to the subject of how cumbersome their day is because of all the things that they're being asked to do. And I think if you think about the direction of technology, where engineers are being involved in a lot more now than they were before. I'm thinking about things like testing, the responsibility of testing, the responsibility of securing your application, of making sure the performance is where it should be, of managing the infrastructure. There are more things that you have to worry about now as an engineer. So in this time where I was sitting at lunch listening to this group of engineers talk about how cumbersome their role is now and how they have to juggle so many things, I remember hearing an analogy used that really stuck with me. The analogy was, it's like I'm juggling and I'm doing a really good job. I have 5 different things that I'm juggling, and then someone throws something into the mix of the juggle that I'm doing here, and I drop something, and then they point at me and say, "See, it's your fault. You're not a great juggler." Right? And
Yeah.
if you think about that, like you have to feel for that engineer because they're doing a lot already and they're doing a great job at it. And the way we're asking them to incorporate new things is not necessarily done in a way where we're doing it side by side with them. It's kind of like we're standing in front of them and tossing it over the bridge and saying, good luck. Let's see if you can continue to juggle. And when they can't, we're surprised that they can't, which doesn't necessarily feel like we're being empathetic towards the role and what comes with the role.
How would you suggest to develop, that empathy?
I think it comes with, if you're asking for engineers to understand security and be empathetic towards the needs of cyber and the people who are in cyber, the same should be true on like the flip side, right? The folks who are in cyber should also be empathetic towards what engineers go through and what they're managing through, day in and day out. There should be empathy on both sides. And I don't know if it's easy to get there, but it's possible, right? And I think if we get there, we start to understand how to collaborate more effectively. Programs like the one I'm describing do help because they get to the core of the problem, which is there's a misalignment in desired outcomes. One side has a desired outcome, which is to be secure and safe in everything we send out to customers. The other side has a desired outcome of to be quick and speedy and high quality in what we deliver to customers, right? And both sides thinks that their desired outcome is more important. If we get to a
Well,
stage,
it's
yeah. If we get to a stage where like we see that both outcomes are important and we balance, I think it starts to help both sides get to a better place.
yeah, I think it's probably the balance depends, I don't know if you think in your experience, but from what I heard a lot on organization maturity and organization culture, well, especially the maturity part, because the culture, as you mentioned, it takes years, to change because you saw the results of the kind of gamification program in years and you saw the impact directly, that's what you mentioned, directly on the culture, how people actually became more involved. That's, takes time. Sometimes you need kind of the results right now at this moment, also because of the compliance. In a sense, when the results, I need it right now. So suddenly the company needs a card, PCI DSS compliance. And did you have such, scenarios? And what would you recommend, someone to deal with? The results are needed now.
Expand on that a little bit. You mean how do we find that balance between that I need the speed
It's
of the
not,
delivery?
yeah, like speed deliver versus, security. How do you, because it's tough to change, the culture. It takes a long time to change the culture. So when do you need the result? When you need the results now in terms of security, what do you do?
In terms of balancing speed and security, I tend to lean on the side of security all the time. It's easy to say and it's hard to do, but I tend to lean on that side first because I know that even if you're chasing after speed and you're trying to get something done, you need the results now, you need to deliver now. If you move security to the side of like afterthought or priority number two, it will disrupt your speed eventually anyway, right? It will get in the way of what you're trying to do and how fast you're trying to deliver at some point. And I think in the cases where I've had to decide, in the cases where I've had to decide whether to slow something down and deliver maybe a week or two later and focus on getting rid of any bigger issues that we have behind the scenes that could lead to security problems down the line. Whenever I've chosen to first handle the security issues, it's always paid dividends in the long run. It's always gave me back that time, whether it's, in the form of we don't have to do some major upgrade because we did it now, or in the form of we don't have to figure out how to find a different library to use because we upgraded to the latest before we release it. We released that always seems to pay off if you handle it now than if you handle it later. It always comes back to bite you if you wait till later.
Do you think the security should always start in the EDE, or do you think maybe we should focus on, let's say, running a scanner on each PR? Where do you think is the best way to stop issues in the beginning?
I would say if we can do it in the IDE, we should do it there. Now, in my experience, we haven't got there yet where we can have that happening in the IDE. So it tends to happen when we push a merge. Once we merge the code, then the scanners run and check what's been out there and what's being pushed out there. In an ideal world, I would love for us to get closer to the engineer where things are being created, where things are being built, which is right here on the laptop. And if we can actually see what's happening and alert the engineer about it in real time as they're building it, I think it saves them time and it saves them a lot of headache of having to rechange things and rearrange everything and then push out a merge again.
Do you think it gives maybe security less control because you don't see what's happening, on Visual Studio Code, or you can see what's happening, on merge request? Do you think sometimes it is scary?
It is scary, yes. In some ways, yes, it is scary. But I would say like there's a trust and verify aspect of this, right? You got to trust that the engineer is going to do the right thing and then make sure you're verifying on the other side once you've seen them push out that change and it's out there almost on its way to production.
What did you find most frustrating, when it comes to security?
Okay. So when it comes to security, I've heard engineers talk about how difficult it is to go back and fix something that is being like caught in a scanner, right? So something is saying, hey, you're using a version that is, is a medium level critical, is a medium level vulnerability. It's not at the critical level, it's not at the high level, it's a medium level, and I have to go back and fix that because it's important. And I think some of our engineers have looked at that and said, it's important, but how important is it? Is it more important than me getting this done on time and delivered on time so we can meet our deadlines? It's at a medium level. And I think the way we've categorized vulnerabilities, where we say this is critical, this is medium, this is high, this is low, it causes frustration down the line because it gives you a misconception of how important it is to go and handle that problem. If something's at a medium, it still should be corrected today, I would think. It should be handled right now because if it's at a medium, it means it can be exploited in some way, right? If it's at a low, it can be exploited in some way. It's just about the impact of that exploit that I think they've decided to mark it as a low or medium. But having it labeled as medium, it messes with the psyche and makes me think, this is not that big a deal right now. I can come back to this a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months from now, or I can upgrade later. And I think people on the cybersecurity side don't see that medium as something that can be handled later. They see it as something that's important now. And it's almost like we have two groups that are not speaking the same language because one person sees the criticality, the other person sees a relaxed, not that big a deal type vibe from just seeing that label as medium.
How would you create this bridge? Because if we speak English and say French, we're not going to understand each other. So one person has to learn the language.
Yeah, I would change I would change the way certain things are labeled and really ask the question, is this something that can be exploited? And what are the chances of it being exploited? What percent risk am I accepting with this particular vulnerability, with this particular finding, if I continue to allow it to live in my environment, to live in my application? I would dig deep and get to, I think a more effective label would be a number that tells me, a score that tells me there is a 80% chance that this could be exploited. And here are some examples of where it's been exploited. Here are some examples of the impact that it's created out there in the wild. If you tell me, right, if you tell me about like what could happen, I think it speaks more, it amplifies the problem because now I understand what the true impact is and not just some high, medium, low score.
Yeah, I think sometimes you do have scores like a CDSS score. On the escape side, we built our own escape severity score that we show to our customers as we decided to indeed adapt it based on the business impact, for example. And also interesting that you mentioned use cases because it's something that I hear more and more, like give me concrete examples, of actually how it can be how it can be explored, how it can be done. So it speaks so much more, to people, and it's definitely what most of let's say tooling lacks today. Do you think
Yeah.
it's the responsibility of security engineer to give these examples or to provider?
Your question was, do I think it's more on the security side?
Do you think it's more on the security side to give let's say, to a developer those concrete use cases, or do you think it's actually security tools that should give to security engineers those cases so they can give them to developers?
Oh, I think it should come from the tools. The tools are smart enough to say, hey, here are examples of where this finding has been exploited. And there's databases out there that will be able to give that information. So if there's a particular if there's a particular library that has a version that we're using that has been exploited, tell me that, right? Tell me that, give me a link that I can click that'll open up an article that will show me what happened there. And I think that is more telling, that is more impactful than just saying this is a medium. Because what does that really mean?
I think it's very hard to find what it really means.
Yeah. What does that really mean?
Yeah, I think when you just look and you don't know, medium low doesn't tell you anything To be honest, List, when I look, it's also hard for me to understand. And there is, one question that I always ask, towards the end of the podcast. If there would be, one advice that you could give to people who are just starting, maybe let's say both to security and developers, or maybe a younger generation, maybe your daughter is going to be future, would be one advice that you could give her how to become better at writing secure code, what would it be?
One piece of advice I would give for folks who are trying to understand how to write more secure code, how to understand security at a deeper level than just the surface, is to gamify it and have fun with it. Turn it into something that is naturally and organically a good time. The program that we created, we found a way to make it naturally a enjoyable experience. I'm one of those engineers that I obsess over the experience of everything, whether I'm building a feature for a customer or I'm building an experience for developers. The experience itself is the product, is what we should be worried about, not which technology we use and how great this technology is compared to that one. It's about, does it do the job in the best way for the customer, for the developer, for whoever you're creating that experience for? And if you're someone who's trying to learn, there are so many great tools out there that have focused on the experience of learning how to be a great engineer who also writes great secure code and doesn't put security at the back burner. Those tools, like for example, OWASP Juice Shop is a great tool that is set up in a way where it's enjoyable. You can jump in, learn how to do some hacking, and then also if you want to go and look at the code itself for Juice Shop and see what went wrong, Hack the Box is another one of those. I think Secure Code Warrior does a really great job of gamifying learning. If you're someone who's trying to figure out how to make this fun, there are platforms out there that have done a good job of building an experience that is fun, that will really elevate for you the learning experience, and then also make it seem like you're not really, it'll make it seem like you're not burdened with security, but you're actually enjoying the experience of learning security because it's a good time.
What was your favorite badge that either you've created, for developers or that you've earned?
We went all the way to what we call like a specialty level. So it started with an associate level, a professional level, and a specialty level. And in the specialty level, you had to lead a threat modeling session for a team. And I had never at that time even done threat modeling yet for my team, which is a little embarrassing to say because, at that time, I saw myself as like some up and coming security slash, full stack engineer. And I'd never done threat modeling yet. But going through that experience helped me see, wow, there's so much more I need to learn. And still to this day, there's so much more I need to learn. But I think for me, just being able to get or go after that specialty level badge was like a badge of honor, where now I feel like I still have a ways to go, but I've gotten somewhere and I should appreciate the journey that I've taken to get here. Yeah, it lights me up because I feel like now I'm at a place where I have the awareness that I wanted, I've accomplished something, and now I have more to go towards.
What's the number one thing that you want to learn next?
So next, I really want to learn how to use AI tools in security. Yeah, that piece of it has eluded me for a long time. I've read about how people are able to use AI to do hacking. I don't have that skill yet. I don't have that talent yet, but I'm going to go get it.
Okay.
I really want to learn how to do that, how to incorporate AI into some of the things I do as a ethical hacker.
More like building AI agents to do that.
To do the work for me. Yeah. That if I can get to that level of understanding how to do that well, I'll feel like I've gotten, I've jumped to another tier.
I can send you a really good article by Ashman. I can't pronounce his surname. I'm so sorry. And, he built an AI agent how to actually discover secrets in the JavaScript code, so kind of basis of the research that the Escape did last year, and he built an AI agent for that. So I can I'll send you, and I'll put also in the
Tell
description
me
link.
more about that. Is that like What's that like?
So he built from the scratch. I think I don't remember exactly what he used, but the goal was to take the front end JavaScript code, and it was offensive. So it was offensive AI security agent that he built, and then he wrote full the description, because initially like he built a test lab for that. I think he's done it with a Flask. 100% sure, but yeah, so he analyzed different JavaScript API endpoints. So he tried to give, I think, a URL, a JavaScript URL, and find different API endpoints in this URL, analyze them, and craft and send request, and analyze the response. So that was kind of the basis of his agent. Cannot go into the code part on my side after that, but it was very similar to the research that we've done. That's why it really, for example, stood out to me, because now with AI, for example, for us, we looked for the patterns for different API secrets. If this is the pattern that corresponds, for example, to AWS, this GitLab key, the GitHub key that are exposed in the wild. While right now with the AI agent, you can actually ask them, find me this type of keys, and it will able to do that without coding the whole part and looking for different libraries. So that's kind of I think the impactful, one of the impactful parts for that.
Wow, that sounds cool. You're gonna send me something on that.
Yeah, I'll send you a link on on LinkedIn, so you can can take a look if that's the topic that you want to learn about. It's quite. I'm sure, like with your coding experience, it's gonna be easy to reproduce harder. Yeah. And one last thing, I was asked, you already recommended, some training resources like OWASP Show, but I also always ask if there is a book that you could recommend to someone to learn a bit more about security.
Yeah, I have a book that I think is bigger than just security, is more about like change. And the reason why I want to recommend this is I think adapting your mindset to say, okay, I'm going to be more than just an engineer. I'm going to make a change that will allow me to see why other aspects of technology are important and are part of my role. That change itself is a big change, and it requires a mindset shift. It requires a level of like perspective. And there's a book that it's a very simple, short book, but it really drives home on how to make changes in a way where you see why it's difficult to make changes. And that book is called Who Moved My Cheese? I believe the author
Okay.
is Spencer Johnson. If I have to, I think the author is Spencer Johnson. I hope I'm not getting that wrong, but
I will look it up and put the link in the
yeah.
description.
Who Moved My Cheese essentially helps you understand why we all struggle to make change, why we all struggle to change. And essentially, we all have within us this idea that I like change. I'm okay with change. It's not a big deal for me. I'm always adaptable, always flexible. But I think sometimes saying that is a coping or a defense mechanism where we're only just saying that because that's what we aspire to be, but we're far from that. And when we're actually met with the need to make a change as big as saying, hey, maybe I'm going to learn security and learn why it's important. When we decide that we're going to make a change like that, we're apprehensive and we're like, oh boy, this is scary. Even though we think we're people that are great at adapting and being flexible. And this book literally paints that picture for you in the brightest colors. So I highly recommend people read that. I think it's like maybe a 50 or 70-page book. It's really short.
Everyone can find time for that.
Yeah. Everyone can find time for that. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. It's so simple. And my niece gave it to me. I believe she's like 13. She's like, take a look at this book. And I'm like, whoa, like you're making
Okay.
book recommendations for me? Yeah, it's a really
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much for the recommendation. I'll definitely put the link in the description. And thank you so much, Des, for coming on the podcast and sharing your perspective. And I hope it's useful, not only for security engineers, but also, well, it is useful for security engineers for their relationship with them, but also something they maybe can share with their development teams for inspiration as well, especially, with engineering leaders on their side. So thank you so much. It was very fun.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me on.